Hi there, and welcome back to Season 3 of Cyburst, a podcast about science, popular culture, and entertainment. This podcast is for everyone, no matter if you're a film director, a fashion designer, or geologist. We are your hosts, Isabel
and Ella. We are two science communicators and Solarpunk enthusiasts taking this podcast on a journey into hopeful futures. This episode, we're going to be talking all about Ochrepunk, Indigenous Futurisms, and this episode is going to be structured a little differently because for the first time this season, we have a very special guest. Matt, would you like to say hi?
G'day.
Woo! So excited to have you on the podcast. I feel like this has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Very stoked. But before we dive into it, it's super important, as always, that we acknowledge that this episode of Cyburst is being recorded on Ngunnawal and Ngamurarri Country. Dowra Nuna, Dowra Ngunnawal, Yangu, Nalimanyin, Dunimanyin. Ngunnawal Wari, Dawa Wari, Dindi, Wangirilijin Yin. This is Ngunnawal Country. Today we are all meeting together on Ngunnawal Country. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the elders. And huge respect to Tara and Belle for sharing that bit of Ngunnawal language with us. Of course, as always, we extend those respects to all traditional custodians on the lands that you're listening to this episode on. So have a moment and think about where you are right now in the world. That's really important.
Thank you, Ella. So today we're going to be talking about lots of things, all themed around Indigenous storytelling and futures. We're going to be touching on optimism in First Nations storytelling and creative works, and Indigenous Futurisms, which is a term coined by Grace Dillon that describes a genre imagining what life would be like for Indigenous people in the future. So Dillon mentions in her Walking the Clouds anthology of Indigenous sci-fi how Indigenous Futurisms, quote, invariably change the perimeters of sci-fi, challenging expectations of setting, plot, dialogue, and characters typically associated with science fiction and also fiction more generally, by placing indigeneity and Indigenous knowledges at the forefront of humanity's future. They can also offer a, quote, place away from colonialism or even create settings in which colonialism never occurred and essentially envisage native futures, Indigenous hopes and dreams recovered by rethinking the past in a new framework. And I think that all ties in beautifully to our overarching Solarpunk theme this season and brings a really important dimension to the conversation that we haven't done like a deep dive on yet, as well as something called Ochrepunk. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Ella to introduce our very special guest today.
Yeah, so thanks for that primer. We have someone amazing in the studio with us today, Matthew Heffernan, who is a Luritja man, a PhD student, a software developer, a board member, a creative technologist, a playwright, and a poet. He wears so many hats, it's unbelievable. And just two of Matt's creations I'd love to highlight here so that you can get to know him a bit better are Indigemoji, which is a sticker set of 90 emojis representing the life, culture, and language of Arrernte Country in Central Australia, which was huge. I remember backing that on Kickstarter. That was so great to watch that follow along the process. So I love that. But a more recent creation of Matt's is the robot dog. And we are going to bring it up multiple times throughout this episode. So I highly encourage that if it sounds like something you'd be into, which I think if you're listening to this, you will be, go ahead and watch it. It's a Melbourne theatre company production all about identity and technology in the future. And when Matt isn't creating really cool things to put into the world, which it sounds like you're doing all the time, you're also learning Mandarin. So cool. Wow. And a bit about Matt's academic journey so far. He started with a Bachelor of Information Technology, then a Master of Applied Cybernetics, and he is currently pursuing a PhD in Cybernetics, exploring stories of our future and how Indigenous axiology, ontology, and epistemology can inform the development of technological designs and prototypes across speculative and futurist thought. Super cool. Matt's positionality also includes an ethos of free and open software and a commitment to preserving Indigenous knowledge systems and understanding the narratives that shape this cultural identity. And this positionality is deeply entwined with Matthew's personal experiences and cultural heritage, growing up between a remote Indigenous community called Papunya, Alice Springs, and Darwin. So we're so excited to have you here, Matt. Thanks so much. I feel like I could talk to you forever. So it'll be great to have, even just this 1 hour, I guess, record of a beautiful conversation together, like we always have, and I hope that we continue to have too. But I guess a great place to start maybe this conversation is to talk a little bit about Indigenous representation in the media. Some notable examples of Indigenous Australians in media include the recent success Black Comedy, the classic Rabbit Proof Fence, and of course Jedda, which was the first Australian feature-length film made in colour, and also a really important moment for representation of Indigenous Australians on screen. And you've created something called the Jedda Test. Would you mind talking us a bit through that test and why it's important?
Sure. The film Jedda is really, really important because it's not just the first colour film in Australia, it's also the first movie with Indigenous people as main characters.
Yeah.
So protagonist and antagonist. And the white folk kind of pop in and out of the story. They're certainly there, but they're not the focus, which blows my mind. And when it was premiered in Darwin at the Starcade Cinema, usually they had it segregated. So Aboriginal people had to sit up the front. But for that premiere, they allowed the honour of the two stars from the film to kind of sit with the whites, which I think it's terrible kind of from a historical perspective, but it shows, I think, that the film was starting to kind of ask questions about, the race relations in our country at the time. But the Jedda Test.
Yes, yes, please. I want to hear more about this.
I think it's always important to kind of frame the movie as well. It's really, really important in Australian history. The Jedda Test kind of comes out of the research I was doing. So I was watching a bunch of films.
Best research ever.
Yeah, that is very fun.
Because I said to my supervisors, I love literature. I just kind of, the short attention span, and I need to kind of be always excited and stimulated, and, I need more than just books and essays and stuff. So they said, here's a bunch of films you should watch. And of course, film in itself is a very important way to talk about culture and talk about ourselves, talk about our country and that kind of thing. So that's where the Jedda Test comes out of, is watching that movie and then making the choice of watching other Australian films where Indigenous people are either the main characters or feature heavily in the plot. And then kind of time bounding that between the Jedda and about the 1990s, so the start of the 1990s. Part of that is important too because this is what they call the Australian New Wave. So there was a lot of films kind of touching on the idea of what it meant to be an Aussie, to be Australian. How are we different but connected to the British identity while also being just below Asia, while also having this group of people that were here before us.
So like a real exploration of that identity through mainly film at that point in time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's always, for me, the research into those films at the time was quite interesting because of the way in which they were framing Aboriginal people. And that's kind of the Jedda moment, is I was familiar with the Bechdel Test, which comes out of a series of web comics. But their first name, but Bechdel was the name of the person. And it's not an academic thing. It was kind of more of a meme that got popular.
Yeah.
But I think it really exploded and put into the common consciousness the way in which we can analyze film and media a little bit critically.
Yeah.
And so I was inspired by that because there's nothing like that for Indigenous movies. There's bits and pieces. There's other variations of the Bechdel test, but nothing really for Aboriginal people. So essentially the question is, are there Aboriginal people in the film? More than one?
Plural.
Plural. Do they talk to each other about things other than the white people in the film? And I had two more questions in the Jedda test, which start to deviate from the Bechdel. So if they're speaking in their language, is the language subtitled? So do you actually understand what they're saying? And I think this is important because in those early films, it's presented, the language is presented without any context as kind of a mysterious, different other, right? And then the last question is, are the Aboriginal people, quote, normal people, or do they have special mystical powers derived from their close connection with nature, blah, blah, blah? Because oftentimes that was also quite a common theme in a lot of these films is Aboriginal person is there as a mystical master to guide the white person to their destiny.
And that, I remember studying Jedda in my high school media class, and we were looking at a whole, just I guess like array of Indigenous representations before the turn of the century. And one of the critical aspects we were looking at is how many times is that depiction done as like the silhouetted man on top of a mountain with a spear,
Right.
and like having that mystical element rather than, you know, being seen as human. So it's really interesting that something, you know, we pointed out in, I guess, like a year 11 media class has made its way to this test, and makes me very appreciative for my media teacher for, I guess, helping a whole generation of people, you know, start to ask those questions, which I hope the Jedda test does as well.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of films that quote unquote pass the Jedda test, or ones that maybe don't? Or
I think a lot of movies, even during that Australian New Wave, passed the test.
yeah,
So I'm thinking the Count of Jimmy Blacksmith,
Oh yeah.
that passes the test. There's lots of Aboriginal people in it. I'm pretty sure it's subtitled when they speak language. And there's complex relationships that are shown in that. I also, I guess, want to highlight too that just because a thing doesn't pass the test, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad movie or terrible representation.
Yeah.
And then vice versa too, right?
Yeah.
These things are very hackable. You could have it all front-ended and the rest of the movie is terrible.
yes.
If all of that exists in just a 3-minute bubble in the film.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm
different story.
just thinking about some Disney movies, right? And it's like they try to have all of particular representations, but then it's like, okay, that's great, you have that, but then it's actually still a bad movie.
Yeah.
Like you haven't spent any time on the story.
Yeah. Well, I think of sort of Marvel Endgame. There was a moment in that. I like those movies, but there was a moment in there where the women superheroes get together to help Spider-Man.
Feminism.
It was so cringe and terrible.
They were literally like, can we get every woman in this film to have one moment where they pass on
Oh no.
like the torch, essentially. And then like, that's it. We've done it. We've solved feminism. We have representation.
We fixed it now, everyone.
We've never done any wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
But there, you know, to be a bit more direct and answer your question, there's the chant of Jimmy Blacksmith.
Yeah, okay.
Radiance is also quite good.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That actually comes out of a play, I think, written by a white bloke. But the movie is fantastic. The play is really good.
That was a Rachel Perkins.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rachel Perkins. I think this is her directorial debut as well.
Yeah.
But I think of things like Crocodile Dundee as well, and doesn't necessarily pass the test, but is a really great representation of Indigenous humour and use of technology in kind of modern context. Because there's the classic scene where the woman is trying to take a photo of him. He's like, "You can't take a photo of me." She's like, "Oh, do you think I'll steal your soul?" He's like, "No, you got your shutter cap on."
You're actually doing it wrong. You can't do it. Yeah. I guess in that framing, like another way to break down like the importance of this test is it's like an invitation to explore, is there othering going on here?
Exactly. Yeah. Perfectly put.
Yeah.
Because I think we can be quite passive consumers of media, right? All of these things are just tools for us to just ask questions.
Yeah, and engage on like a deeper level too.
I wanted to talk about a couple of texts that I actually studied during my honours year, and I am someone who reads a lot of books. So these are written examples, but not film examples. Sorry, but I wanted to bring them up anyway because I spent quite a lot of time engaging with these pieces. And they're two pieces of Indigenous Futurism from Australia. And yeah, maybe we can talk about the different kinds of Indigenous representation within them. One is actually by Dr. Amberlin Quaymalinia, who's part of Cybernetics, collaborates with Cybernetics. And it's her Tribe trilogy. And the other is a novella called Water by Ellen van Neerven, which I don't know if either of you have heard of that one.
No, not Ellen, but I have read the first one of the Ashela Wolf trilogy.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Yeah, so the Tribe trilogy is, for those people who don't know, is in a future where the Earth's continents have become one landmass, and environmental catastrophe causing extreme weather patterns and mass biodiversity loss has fundamentally transformed the planet's geography. And the trilogy follows a tribe of teenagers led by the protagonist, Ashela Wolf, who's a young Aboriginal woman. And most tribe members have evaded imprisonment for their special abilities, such as shape-shifting, flying, controlling fire, so it's kind of like a superhero story, which the government believes can instigate a second environmental disaster. So those who have an ability are detained, and the tribe fights for a reassessment of this rule throughout the series. And then the novella, Water, is set in a future Australia, which has become a republic and follows a young Aboriginal woman called Caden. And in this future, the government has built a second country called Australia 2.
Oh my goodness.
Listen to the rest of this though. From nearby islands for First Nations peoples to quote unquote get back what they lost and more. So during the construction of Australia 2, a species called sand plants, sometimes sand people or plant people, native to the islands are found. And over the course of the novella, Caden realizes that the government is actually slowly poisoning these creatures to force them off the islands, and consequently becomes part of the movement to help reclaim traditional ownership of the plant people's home. So I think both these examples are quite interesting portrayals of Indigenous futurisms, and both of them initially are set in a dystopia, like at the start, but have a very optimistic outlook, especially as things come together and how it all ends as well. They explore what happens when people from different backgrounds, both privileged and marginalized, come together in search of a more equitable and sustainable way of living with each other and with the land. And there are also works that center country and connection, people, cultures, and ultimately disrupt Western ideas of science, technology, and knowledge, and challenge Western visions of the future. And I just thought they were both two really interesting pieces to bring up. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about them just from hearing, bits and pieces.
Yeah, I guess my initial thoughts on those kind of in context of this season and the themes that kind of brought us all together to have this chat were about what type of punk that might be, because the dystopia and I guess the negativity don't really fit quite into what we understand to be like the cyberpunk genre. But I also haven't really seen like foregrounded much, I guess, like sustainable technology, though that doesn't exclude from like a solarpunk genre. So, maybe these are examples of something that could fit into Ochrepunk. Maybe these are examples of something else. And I think the punk element here is kind of interesting because both of them are depicting people or groups rallying against the government, which is the dominant cultural force, which is, punk. So that's kind of, I guess, less of a question, but more of a reaction to hearing about those texts in that context. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. There was something that I wanted to ask you, Matt, because with the Tribe trilogy, obviously some of the Aboriginal people have special abilities. They have magical abilities, and sort of wanted to talk about that and like the Jedda Test, and if it's different in this context because they're I don't know, it's not like, oh, they have this magic that people don't know, but it's like this is an explicit like superhero ability, like shape-shifting. People understand what it is. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different because the characters obviously are interacting with each other.
Yeah.
But also they're not there as a prop for a white character to find themselves. Mm-hmm. But also, I guess from an Indigenous mythology perspective or spiritual perspective as well, powers kind of feature in the way in which we talk about ancestral beings and so forth. So I see it as a kind of really neat and cool way to talk about this, but in a different context.
Something that I didn't bring up is one of Ashala's abilities is interconnectedness and creating interconnectedness between all cultures and people and non-human nature as well. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that it's not, like a classic off the shelf superpower. Like it's saying something about the character and what is needed to, I don't know, to bring about a better future in this scenario that they're in. Like it seems very grounded. It's not that she's given the abilities of, I don't know, like invisibility just because it's like a cool thing that people already know exists in the superhero realm. Like it's very grounded, I think. Yeah.
I actually love that perspective because it reminds me of back in my day, we had a show called Captain Planet.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I've been watching it. Yes, I know, because we want to talk about it in something that we're working on at the moment. Yes.
All right, spoiler. But there's a character on there called Marty, who's the youngest.
Yes.
I didn't realize he was Indigenous either. He's meant to be an Indigenous character from South America. Mm-hmm. It's never, I think, really explicit, but his power is heart. Yeah. And I always loved it. Yeah. And actually, to form Captain Planet, they would combine their powers. Yeah.
They needed heart.
They always needed heart. Mm-hmm. And everyone would be, oh, this is the weakest, worst power. Mm-hmm. But actually, when you watch the show, it's kind of crazy how he doesn't use it to his advantage.
Yeah.
Because he could really mess things up.
Yeah, he could really mess up.
How powerful
it's
it is.
So true. Yes,
it's a great connection.
When I was watching scenes from it about a month ago, I got really excited about that element of it as well. I was like, oh my God, heart as technology, heart as like superpower. And I was like messaging Ella about it. I don't think Ella ever really engaged with it. She was like, okay, she's excited about this thing.
Sometimes I just let Isabel be excited about something in our text messages. Then when I see her in person, I'm like, that's cool. What else? Because sometimes at the moment it just like is like
yeah,
which I do too.
True.
So
yeah, for different things like Pokemon and
X-Men.
Yes, but we've brought up Ochrepunk a couple of times.
We haven't even spoken about what it is.
No, we haven't spoken about what it is. And Matt, this is something that you talk about in your work as a genre and a method. So would you like to explain what Ochrepunk is? And then we can maybe talk about how it complements or challenges solarpunk and other dash punk genres.
Yes, I think this is going to be a bit tricky for me because I am still trying to put the parameters around what I want to make it.
Yeah.
And part of it is also retrospective as well. So picking bits of media and saying, I think this represents aesthetics or elements of Ochrepunk.
Yeah.
But it's also this other thing that I don't necessarily have a good, clean podcast level definition for, right?
Yeah.
But
That's
it's
fine.
so exciting because
Yeah.
we're here as the work is being done. So
Yeah.
if this also helps with your PhD,
It super does.
we would
Yeah.
love that for you.
So I think the bit of media that I can describe that captures a massive element of it is a show called The Bush Mechanics. So it came out of Yundamu as well in Central Desert. And it's basically mob from Central Desert. It's kind of structured as a fiction, non-fiction thing. And they say, hey, we need to get in the car and go to this other place to pick up so-and-so for a footy match in this other community. And they get in a car. The car is always terribly maintained. So they come up with these really ingenious ways using nature, using the bush or whatever it might be to repair their vehicle. And so it's usually this haphazard car that they've kind of DIY'd to make work for themselves so they can kind of get to one place to another.
Yeah.
So that to me is quintessential Ochrepunk. There is also the stories, if you're a cybernetician person, you would have heard the stories of the telegraph line as well that went through Central Australia and the ways in which the insulators were made of ceramic and broken off because they were quite useful as cutting utensils, essentially. That to me also captures the spirit of what Ochrepunk is as well. So it's this idea that, drawing from Indigenous Futurism, that for Aboriginal people, our dystopia and our apocalyptic moment was colonialism, and we're living in the dystopias of it now. And Europeans are as well. We are just in denial about it a little bit.
They're just worse at acknowledging it.
Because if you look at our river systems and, you know, I won't get too into it, but there's a lot wrong ecologically and in the balance of our country. And this is part of that apocalyptic moment. And we're now trying to claw back by using Indigenous knowledge systems to kind of find that balance again. So, train of thought. So the apocalypse, from a lot of Indigenous futurist literature, says was colonialism around the world. Ochrepunk is about I'm calling it the radical now or the radical present.
Ooh, I like that.
So from a genre perspective, it's not kind of clean sci-fi computer hacking or sterile.
It's not like the future TM.
It's not the future TM. Blue lights everywhere. It's about people who are using the tools that have iterated over time. So if you think of any kind of future technology or any technology we have in the room now, it's got a lineage. So the camera, for example, that comes out of painting and photography, and it was black and white. It was on film. It had literal film that used to be very hard to maintain. Talking about Jedda, they lost a big chunk of the film.
Yeah. Because it did it explode or fall out of the airplane?
Fell out of an airplane.
It fell out of the airplane on the way back to be processed.
Yes.
Oh my
Best story of film ever.
But then the other part to that too is they had to make sure that the film cans, because film used to come in, I sound very old when I say this, but they used to come in cans, literally, and they had to keep it cool in caves, which I think is kind of very Ochrepunk-ish in the nature of that, right? Using country to work in symbiosis with technology.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the radical present, is radical now is talking about the lineage of the technologies rather than saying this is the future. The thing you're looking at barely represents any of the things that you're looking at or working with now. It's about, hey, we'll still have probably petrol engines in 50 years. They might not be quite as ubiquitous, but they'll be around. There'll be versions of it. There'll be the same type of tools, hammers. There'll still be cords. There'll still be wires. There'll still be oil. It'll still be dirty. And kind of culturally, we won't be that different to where we are now. And that's kind of capturing the real, how do I say it? Rather than the fancifulness of science fiction sometimes, which I think can get into the conceit of being too removed from where we are socially. This is about looking back as well, even though it's a future story.
Yeah.
I love so many aspects about that. And I think the part that I love the most is that kind of point you just touched on, is that this is a future that we can imagine right now. And I think a lot of the disconnect that happens when you're trying to imagine, say, like a better future or a worse future or any type of future that, is so far away you can't possibly think what it looks like, is that that's really hard for people to conceptualize and understand and even like play with. Whereas this form of, I guess, like is very grounded in right now. And it's kind of saying like, what if today, but different. And the part about acknowledging the past is so important. And I love the DIY element. I think that is also very similar with a lot of my favorite aspects of Solarpunk, which is, taking what we already have. And, they have like, Solarpunk has this direction they want to take the leftovers and the materials and the tools in towards. But I think that's one of the most real imaginables we have. Yeah.
I think the two other things that I forgot to mention.
Go for it. Yeah.
Go for it.
See, I'm hacking it as we're talking. So the two other things are brain blanking. The two other things are that it is also, when you think of dystopias, cyberpunk, other science fictions, sometimes they can center the antagonist or the negativeness of the society that the heroes find themselves in. And I think that can sometimes take away from kind of the practical ways in which we now can overcome some of these same systems that have been extrapolated out for the sake of story, because we know now how terrible things are for some people.
Yeah.
And I think we, instead of imagining how worse it's going to be in the future,
it's the ways around the worse.
Exactly. How do we punk these systems?
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I forgot what my second bit was. But that's
okay. Maybe if we keep talking, it'll just come back.
Yeah. I was thinking about something that I'm interested in, and I think our listeners would also be interested in, is using the prefix ochre. So like the significance and reasoning behind that, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Well, thank you. You just reminded me of this.
Oh, excellent.
We did it.
Let me answer that question first. So I think ochre is quite an interesting technology. And it might be weird hearing that being said, like, how is this a technology? But if you think about it from an Aboriginal perspective, and actually a worldwide perspective, it's not just used by mob here, it's been used worldwide. It was used for medicine to, calm the stomach. It was used in art. It was used in warfare. It was used, and recently too in warfare, it was used as a fill-in for camouflage when they ran out of paint in Australia in World War II. And essentially, from a science geological perspective, it's just oxidized clay, essentially. So the reason I use it is because I think there's a lot of questions I'm asked is, how do you extrapolate some of my research or extrapolate some of the things I'm thinking about into being relevant for the US or being relevant for Britain or whatever? And this is the second point, is I think universalism should apply to Indigenous ways of thinking and being. And it rarely is, though. We've got to find out ways in which to connect it. But the inverse is never true, right? We never go to a British person really and some of their research and say, hey, how is this relevant to the Australian context?
And if it isn't, it's invaluable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the other big push of Ochrepunk, and why ochre also is used as the prefix, essentially. Not just because it comes out of the trade and so forth and the technology that was here in Australia, but it's been used worldwide. And same with Indigenous stories and storytelling and ontologies. These have universal application.
Yeah. And it doesn't quite lead me to my next thought, but something we wanted to bring up, and I think we've spoken about this a little bit in some of our other episodes, but a lot of solar punk media still shows things a lot like farming and a lot of inherited colonialism without necessarily acknowledging it. And I think there's this big split of people in the solarpunk community who say, like, if you're not acknowledging the colonialism that has happened, it's not solarpunk. So I just wanted to bring that kind of thought into the discussion because, kind of what you're saying about Ochrepunk of like the dystopia has happened and is now, and we're in the impacts of it. I think sometimes solarpunk, in its way of futuring, likes to gloss over it, and I think that's very unhelpful and kind of perpetuates like this period of silence that we're in, where there's a resistance to truth telling, particularly in this country, and that's not very punk. Is kind of my point here. So one of the things that I first connected to with Ochrepunk, coming at it from a solarpunk lens, when I first heard you talk about it, was I was like, yes, this is a huge part of what I feel is missing from the solarpunk genre, and they are separate, but the ways that they combine as well are important. And I feel like there shouldn't be solarpunk worlds that don't acknowledge and move forward through colonialism.
Yeah, and I mean, solarpunk is one of those genres and movements as well where you will see people say it so badly wants to be decolonial as well, like taking the steps to move beyond colonialism, but then you still get those portrayals, like you're saying, Ella, where it's like they want it to be different, but it's still.
And I guess the beauty is it's still an emerging genre, and hopefully when there are more roots put down, I hope that's the solarpunk we see more of in the future. Is more in that direction.
Yeah. And this is something that I've purposefully resisted in the framing of Ochrepunk as well. Is because a lot of science fiction futurist literature has this really binary framing of what our future could be, either good or bad, right? And there's a cultural history of that from the sort of Western canon as well. And so that makes sense. It's kind of hard to think of the world in any other way. However, I think even with the term like colonialism, I think it's easy to retrospectively look at it and just pick out all the terrible things. There's kind of good things that emerged out of it. I know, shoot me. Hot take. But there's kind of good things that emerge out of it. And I think that's also a resistance that I want to put into the Ochrepunk is we've got to not, when we're writing about these things, it actually does us a disservice when we reduce things to kind of really broad labels and
the binaries.
And because for sure I see in solarpunk, where are they getting the critical minerals to create this stuff, right? And to put an example next to it, I look at the gay marriage kind of yarns that were happening prior to it being legislated here. And there was a real hope that it would kind of culturally change the way Australia deals with some, LGBTQI issues. But it's kind of just been this thing that was put into government, but not much culturally has changed. Plus, I want more of my gay friends to get married so I can go to more weddings.
Well, yeah, exactly. Win for everybody, right? More celebrations.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to go into too with like that discussion of binaries and things being either good or bad. And we kind of had that discussion when we met a few weeks ago. But before we get there, and I do want to get there, I think this is also a good moment to talk about your play, The Robot Dog,
Yes.
and how it deals with not placing itself into one of those two binaries. So I did give a little description at the start, but if you missed it, or just to recap, The Robot Dog, futuristic sci-fi play about culture and identity is how I would distill it down, having now viewed it 3 times. Not to say that my perspective is like the one perspective to rule them all, but that's, I think, a pretty good summation, and you should all go watch it. But Matt, how does The Robot Dog create, explore Ochrepunk and Indigenous Futurism?
Yeah, it's thank you for watching it so many times.
Every time I watch it, I message Matt. I'm like, I saw it again.
My royalties are just like ticking up each
It's just
time.
me, and I'm happy with that. It's not just me.
How does it sit within Ochrepunk? I think primarily I wanted it so that the Indigenous character isn't constantly fighting against racism necessarily. It's not just this big trauma story that he's going through, but also he's very technologically adept, the Indigenous character in the show, Harry. Yeah. He just kind of vibes with it. He works in a technology company. He understands the lingo. And that's something that I don't really see in media still. You know, it's always, they're very Aboriginal of the land and stuff. Rarely do we see kind of very competent IT people.
Represent. Yeah.
So there's that element, but then also a lot of the yarns we hear now is how terrible AI is, how it's going to destroy the world, take jobs, all this kind of narrative. This was also a bit of a push back against that, which is also kind of a punk thing for me, which is AI is not going to take jobs. People and directors and CEOs make the decision to push people out, to put AI in their places. And same with people are making the choices of what AI and this type of technology is scraping and including in their data sets. It's not the AI.
The AI does what we tell it to do.
Correct.
Let's just interrogate who the we is.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think this is part of here's my conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
I think
Oh, great. Let's hear it.
the aliens are coming. But it's part of the kind of push to try and dissolve responsibility for those responsible for making those decisions, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I wanted to represent a little bit in the show is it's not necessarily about the technology itself. It's just what is being input into them, but also how when we interface with these systems, can we influence and use it for our own benefit or for servicing humanity more broadly? How can we learn from these technologies?
I just want to talk to you about this forever. I don't know how often you like see a piece of media and you want to write an essay about it, but I think particularly like coming back and watching Robot Dog again, I wouldn't say I became jealous of like VC students who can study it and have to write essays about it, but I was kind of like, oh man, I wish this is my text, because I think there's so much to say there about Harry, who I would say effortlessly switches between using technology and not using technology with those, I don't know, retro futuristic style, like glasses VR headset that comes on and off. And the fact that he changes like his personality with that too. I think there's so much to be said there. But I really like what you just brought into the conversation as well about the technology is there, but at no point I would say in the play, does the technology on stage or through sound or lighting effects ever overpower the presence of the people on stage? And I think that's quite powerful. And I think I love that it's a piece of theatre that does that too, because theatre is, all about being in the moment, watching it live, seeing it happen with people in front of you, for you, the viewer. So I love how those two things combine as well. I think that's really exciting. And I just want to heap endless praise onto you and Rochelle
really
and all of the
good.
creative team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I do love the discussion we're having about the ways that it does punk, because I think this is not punk people would recognize necessarily without maybe this discussion or a primer to all the different varieties of punk.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've never seen a show like this, I think, which is also something
I'd agree.
that we really wanted to push, is this not different for the sake of different, or not cultural or whatever for the sake of it, but I've never seen a show which talks about Indigenous relationships with folks from other cultures that are not Australian, you know what I mean? Even though the history of our country is filled with these stories, like, you're saying that I lived in Darwin, which I did. But I was surrounded by people who have mixed Chinese Indigenous heritage, right? And when we talk about the history of this country, we rarely acknowledge that side of it. Only kind of recently, I would say, at the National Museum, you can check it out, there's an exhibition, have stories come out about, that deep relationship, pre-colonization too, I might add. But in colonization, like the first Indigenous law that came out of Queensland was, and it was, I believe, the first drug law, was targeted at Aboriginal people, and they didn't mention it, but targeted at Chinese people. So they were trying to restrict the trade of opium to Aboriginal people. But if you read the subtext of that, it's to try and ensure that Aboriginal people and Chinese people aren't working together and forming alliances and that kind of thing. Yeah. This all kind of makes up the story of our country, but I see a lot of Shakespeare, which I don't feel is quite Australian.
Yeah.
And while really important in the canon, it doesn't help us kind of navigate some of the stories of what it means to be on this continent, but especially how we navigate AI and navigate the future and how we want to be as a society.
So many good thoughts. I'm going to jump to continuing selfishly the point that I made earlier about the underrated versions of punk within the robot dog. And when we first had this chat with you, you were kind of saying to me, Isabel, like, oh, what type of movies, what type of TV shows are you thinking of? Can you recommend? And I think Isabel and I kind of recommended and spoke about anything other than movies and TV shows. And I'm going to do that again in bringing up the punk in Aboriginal music, because I think it's not recognized as punk. And like there is punk, the music genre, but there's also punk, the thematic, the themes in music as well. And I think a lot of Aboriginal artists, a lot of them are, even hitting the mainstream media on the radio, and they're not being acknowledged as like the punk text that they're bringing to the music industry. I think artists like Baker Boy, Barker, AB Original, the duo of Briggs and Trials, this music is so playful that I think it doesn't register as punk, even though I would suggest that playful music can be punk. But it has this shared anti-establishment spirit. It has a DIY ethos a lot of the time, particularly Australian hip-hop, like that genre that a lot of these artists play in, and a fusion of genres. But it also has this really distinct Australian identity. It's a platform for protest music, for addressing social and political issues like racial injustice and police brutality. And it's punk because of how Australian culture still treats and engages with Indigenous cultures. And I wanted to, I guess, bring that to the forefront because I think similar to how you could go into the Robot Dog and see it being a form of futurism but not see it being a form of punk. I think people are probably listening to a lot of these songs and not realizing that the work that is being done there and the text that's being brought up also exists in this punk way.
Yeah, totally.
And this is also my submission to you to include some of that music in your exploration of Ochrepunk throughout your PhD, because I feel like you don't have enough work to do. So I just thought I'd...
Ella's like, I'm just going to give you more ideas, more things to think about. I was just thinking about with the music conversation, because you brought up some hip hop examples, but my favorite Australian musician is Thelma Plum, who's also Aboriginal, and she definitely, I would classify some of her music as punk as well, and the themes that she touches on. And she will sometimes start with a story that's like, hey, this is bad, but here's how we're turning it around. Like, here's how I'm going to turn it around and change the story. So, yeah.
Yeah, Australian media, I think, underrepresented, unfortunately. But I feel like it's kind of coming together. Love to see it, love to hear it. And I think there's that really interesting optimism that you kind of just touched on there, Isabel, with Thelma Plum's music.
Yeah.
And I guess like acknowledging the bad, but showing the path forward, I think is really cool. Matt, what would you say is the most optimistic part of the Robot Dog?
Wait, can I talk about the music?
Yes, absolutely.
Jump into the music first.
This is just how Ella and I roll on the podcast. We're like, this thing, but wait, let me go back to that thing over there for a minute. Because
have a moment about the music.
Because music is one of my favorite topics.
Okay.
As a former wannabe rapper.
Excellent.
But hip hop itself is very, very closely entangled with punk. Because if you look at the early forms of hip hop, it was the punk labels and punk artists that were playing it at parties and stuff. They saw it as another form of punk, essentially. So think Blondie, think Sugar Hill Gang, those kind of entanglements. That's all kind of happening around the same time, right? So yeah, hip hop is, I think, another branch of the punk tree. But I also think of my uncles, the Warrnambool Band. So Warrnambool is another name for Papanya. If people didn't know that. And Warrnambool Band is the most DIY band you'll ever see. And they were the first kind of like Indigenous rock that's sung in Luritja and a little bit of Yolngu, because my Uncle George, he was a Yolngu man. And a lot of their stuff kind of came from blues, early blues rock. So think Chuck Berry, like Elvis, a lot of this sort of stuff. But then as it kind of grew and became more and more mainstream and more popular, it started to take on more of a general Aussie rock sound, especially when they were touring with Midnight Oil.
Yeah,
that would do it to you.
But I've been told anecdotally that when they were touring with Midnight Oil hated coming on after them because the crowd was so hyped from the Warrnambool Band. But they have a great song called Yakubaingo, which is in Yolngu, it kind of means leave it alone. No, don't touch it.
Okay.
And it's like very angry. But it's not like angry at the system or angry at government or anything like that. It's when, how do I say this? So in Aboriginal culture, right, we're kind of expected to give money if we have money. We're meant to share and that kind of thing. But sometimes it gets a bit much and it gets annoying. So that's kind of what the song is about.
Okay,
He's walking around.
And that's when you say, leave it alone.
Yeah, Yakubaingo. So yeah, great song. Very, very punk in energy.
Yeah. And now that I've got you started on this,
yes,
great. I wasn't expecting you to also be like this into music, but of course you are. You're into everything that's cool. But you brought up again that like DIY kind of style. And I think particularly Aussie hip hop and sampling, which is huge within our specific brand of hip hop. I love that DIY nature too, and the fact that it's always in conversation with itself. It's always in conversation with the music that's come before it, and the direction it wants to go. So even when we're not looking at a lot of the punk text, as I talk about it, like the words, even in conversation with other pieces of music, I see echoes of that Ochrepunk description you were giving of always acknowledging where the technology has been and how we've gotten to this point there too.
And I believe the sampler was invented in Australia too, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think so. I
so many
think
things
it's
are here.
so Australian. It's like ours, you know. But contest it in the comments if you'd like. Well, I'll pull up some sources and get those out
fact
too.
check me.
Yeah, yeah. Sick as Matt.
Actually, I was recently in London. Sorry, super tangent.
Go
No,
for it.
go.
And it's always funny whenever I travel anywhere. I was there for research stuff, not fun. But the hotel I was staying at, I walked past a guy who I swear I knew.
You're like, this is the other side of the world.
I swear that is Briggs. So I double check. And it was Briggs. And so
Wow, that's exciting.
I was I let it go. He walked past me. And then as I was going somewhere else, he was waiting in the lobby. And we kind of know each other, you know, small blackfellow grapevine. So he was just waiting in the lobby. I was, oh my God, how you going, brother? Never thought I'd see someone I know from Australia, let alone like an Aboriginal person.
Yeah.
Here in London.
It's like, this is the NAIDOC chapter in the UK, the Aboriginal, you know what I'm saying.
And then did you like join him on stage and you both like performed together and it was the best night of your life?
In my mind,
Yeah.
that happened.
One day. Yeah. Okay. Let's jump back into optimism in the robot dog. And then maybe also talking about where is Ochrepunk going? Where, you know, potentially the robot dog is the first intentional work of Ochrepunk.
That's a good way of putting it.
What do
Yeah.
you see it leading to?
I'll start with your first question,
Yeah.
the optimism in it. I kind of see lots of moments of that. So when you come to the end, I'm going to give spoilers. If you haven't seen it, sorry.
If you haven't seen it, pause right now.
Yeah,
Go
pause
watch
now.
it. Come back.
We're going to put the link in the description for you to go and watch it, okay?
Oh,
Yeah.
great. After royalties.
Yeah.
So there's a bit at the end where after they've kind of negotiated what the language augments mean for each other, how they're each going to respectively approach language learning and reconnecting with that part of who they are. There's Harry who chooses to do it the old-fashioned way. And that's kind of really important culturally for us too. Because when we were writing the story, I had like a really big cry, spiritual kind of moment where it kind of really hit me that there's people who've lost their language. And if they had something like this would be really, really powerful for them to be able to reconnect and find that lost language for themselves and for their communities. But then for me, where, you know, my language is still very widely spoken, my mum speaks it, my sister speaks it. She was also a translator on the show as well. If I got something like this just because I'm a bit rusty, that would flog me. Like, that'd be so angry that I went through this kind of shortcut way of learning my language and getting a deeper understanding of my culture. So there's kind of that parallel. And that's what we wanted to put into the show as well, where it's not necessarily bad to use this technology. You can do that, and that's just as valid. It's just how you approach it kind of in a spiritual, culturally sensitive way. And I think that's how I want to think about the technology as well. You know, the yarns we're having now about what it means. It was this optimism that it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
It's about how we're approaching these discussions and making sure we're putting the right parameters around it. Second question,
Where is Ochrepunk going from
that's
the
right.
robot dog?
So I'm working on, well, I applied for a fellowship
Mm-hmm.
and
Ooh.
I haven't heard back yet, but I'm hoping that through that I can write my next bit of work. I've written a pitch for it. I've written very, very early drafts, but it's actually based on a true story. But I want it to be a story that when you read it, you'll feel all of the webs of it being relevant to the yarns we're having now about where all of this stuff is going.
And is that going to be another play?
I've applied for the fellowship as a play.
Yeah.
My secret agenda, though, is that it is a film. But I don't know any film people or anything, so I would like to see it with actors and just test it out and see how it lands, because maybe it's not a film. But I think just as soon as kind of you hear the actors and the flow, all of that sort of stuff, I'll get a better understanding.
Very keen for that.
I hope you get it.
Yeah.
I want to be in that audience.
Yes. Sort of touching on what you were saying about the optimism aspects. Ella and I talked in our punk episode earlier this season about cyberpunk portraying a more negative future, meaning with more urban decay, heavy corporate influence, dystopian themes. But in a conversation we had with you the other day, Matt, you mentioned that cyberpunk doesn't have to necessarily be negative. And I was just wondering if you wanted to expand a bit on that, because I think our audience would be interested.
Well, I forgot a lot of that.
That's what this is for.
But actually, touching back on Warumpi Band, my uncles, they have a song called Waru. Check it out on Spotify.
Okay.
The Waru means fire in my language. And the lyrics of the song are actually not mostly in Luritja, it's in Yulmata. And it's about the way in which fire is used by Aboriginal people, not just as a cooking technology, but also as a way to fight fire. So it's used for backburning, and it's also used for hunting sometimes. So sometimes if there's thick areas of bush, we will burn it and see the animals come out so we can get them a lot easier, essentially. But it's this idea that it can be both destructive and creative, because some plants as well, they only drop their seeds after the fire as well. And that's kind of how I see the yarns gradients of this idea of negative and positive. Because cyberpunk, yes, is usually set in, corporate government entanglements and dystopias and so forth, urban decay and that kind of thing. But it is that punk element that's fighting against it always, right? There's always that community, that group that is using the technology that's been kind of responsible for all of the terrible things, but in ways that are creative and productive and generative. And so that's why I think it's you can paint it negative. I think there is suffering and harm that is occurring there, but sometimes it's through the destruction that we can kind of find new ways of creating societies and better things.
I think that is a good place to wrap up this, I guess, main part of the episode. We've spoken about so many things, from how Indigenous people are displayed or portrayed in media to Ochrepunk and futuring, and where the hope can be found in these stories, where these stories might be going in the future, what we hope to see from them, and also where you can find these forms of punk just with a little bit more, I guess, opening and an invitation to view it that way, which is kind of a circular point back to our start with the Jedda Test as an invitation to explore more, think more, talk about it more. And I think this has been such a great episode, and I'm sorry to wrap it up because we could
keep
talk
going
for forever. But thank you so much, Matt, for coming on, spinning these yarns with us, and you bring so much to the discussion from so many different perspectives. So it's just been such a pleasure to have you here and chatting with us. So we might move to our outro session, where if you are new to Cyburst this season, you will know that Isabel and I wrap up with a good news story at the end of the episode to end on an upbeat. But if you're a longtime Cyburst fan, you'll know that we always get our guests to recommend some media. So Matt has 3 excellent media recommendations he's going to give.
Sure does.
But first, Isabel and I will jump into some good news stories.
Yes, we absolutely will. And I just want to echo everything Ella's just said. It was a wonderful episode, and thank you, Matt, for coming on Cyburst. Okay, my good news bit today is linked to languages and knowing lots of different languages.
Well, that's very thematic.
Yes,
Yeah.
I planned this. So a new large-scale international study published in Nature Aging in November 2025, which is when we're recording. This is going to come out later, but at time of recording, found that regularly speaking multiple languages is linked to healthier aging profiles and may delay brain and biological aging.
You're in the green, man.
Yeah. Well, I was
Thanks,
reading
Aha.
this going, geez, I've really got to learn Spanish and not let that fall out of the family line. So speaking just one additional language reduces the risk of accelerated aging. But the more languages you speak, the more these benefits grow. So that's pretty cool as well. So previous research in this space has suggested that speaking multiple languages can improve cognitive functions such as memory and attention, which boosts brain health as we get older. But many of these studies rely on small sample sizes and use unreliable methods of measuring aging, which then leads to results that are inconsistent and not always generalizable. Whereas this new study involved over 86,000 adults aged 51 to 90 years old across multiple countries, and multilingual participants were around half as likely to show older than expected biological profiles compared to monolinguals, so speaking only one language. So the researchers, and I as well, are hoping that this encourages a bigger culture around language learning and influence policymakers to encourage more language learning in education. As language learning is clearly an enriching, powerful, low-cost tool for giving your brain a healthy workout.
Wow. That
Yeah.
study is intense. 86,000 participants
I know.
is huge.
I don't know how they did that. It sounds complicated, but you know what? Good on them.
Yeah, and if you want to learn a language, your local library is a great place to start.
Yes.
Lots of free language tools there that aren't Duolingo. Yeah. My good news story, not at all on theme with this episode,
It doesn't matter. I'm sure it's amazing.
but it is talking about this company, Mobile Crisis Construction. They're an Australian non-profit established in 2019. And they have created this fast production interlocking brick mechanism that can be used to bring into places that have experienced a lot of war and used to quickly rebuild infrastructure. And this is really cool. I love that it's Australian and that it's non-profit. But the production here is so quick that a single one of these, makers can create 8,000 bricks in just one day. So in 1 week, enough bricks can be created to build one school or one medical centre or 3 large houses or 10 smaller and joined houses. And this is done through a series of interlocking bricks that slot together kind of like Lego pieces.
Right.
So they don't need any brick, mortar, and a high level of training isn't needed to assemble, which means that civilians, people who are displaced, and volunteers can all help to create, new structures that can go up really quickly to help when it is needed most. The machine crushes and presses rubble from war damage, kind of like building, road, and other rubble, which is first sorted and processed to make sure there's no toxic supplies in the house you might be building or the medical center you might be building. And it was designed and built by engineers. It all fits within a standard size shipping container and can be sent out really quickly. It's currently being used to help rebuild in the Ukraine. So it's on the ground there right now, and it's helping. And the UN estimates that the war rubble in Gaza could take 15 years to clear and over $500 million to do so.
Yeah.
But this technology could speed up that process for very, very cheap and help rebuild in those places with those people where they need it and with the types of facilities that they want most. So I just thought that's a really great example of community-led rebuilding processes. Really cool.
100%. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of that.
So those are our two good news stories. But Matt, would you like to leave our audience with some media recommendations for them to go home and to maybe consume following this episode?
Wait, I wrote it down because I was stressing out about this. But yes, you should learn other languages. It's super great. So the first recommendation is a research paper, but it's very nicely written.
You can trust Matt when he says that.
It's not like my writing. It's actually really nice. It's called The Aboriginal Invention of TV by Eric Michaels. And it's a great story about this anthropologist going to a community called Yuendamu in the Central Desert. And he finds that they are watching VHS tapes together and pirating the satellite channels to broadcast some of the films and stuff that they were making in the community as well. Great read and very influential. The second one I would recommend is Strange New Worlds, Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
The Neo series. And the reason I've said that rather than any of the other series is because, one, it's quite recent. So it's a good entry point into Star Trek because the other series are long and cringy sometimes and very hard to watch. But they're also very good. And my last one is Ghost in the Shell, which is a brilliant Japanese cyberpunk story anime. And it's got a really, really good soundtrack as well. So check that out. But I would also recommend the second one in that series. Both are brilliant, very influential. Don't watch the Scarlett Johansson one. Don't watch that one. It's terrible.
Good to know. I actually
Watch
haven't
the
seen
OG.
Yes, exactly. The OG still stands. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, with that, we'll leave our audience with some questions that they can consider after listening to this podcast. And a question I'd like to pose for people is, where can you apply, or maybe what media would you invite people to apply the Jedda Test to? And what type of conversations will you have following applying the Jedda Test? So don't just apply the test and one and done it. I'd love to know what type of questions you'd follow up with and what media it is that you're talking about.
I'd also love to know, listeners, if this has maybe changed or added to your perspective on what dash punk is and what punk can look like in media. Let us know on our socials at sci_burst or via our Gmail.
cyburstpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, thank you. We actually haven't said it out loud for a while.
Because I keep forgetting it.
It's long as well. Sorry, everybody. But also not sorry. And as always, stay nerdy and we'll see you next time.
Woo!
再见。